After I was forced to cover for a drunk coworker, my boss said, "He has a family, you're single, be a team player." I pulled doubles for weeks, then got a warning for low enthusiasm. So I tracked every time he vanished, every mistake he hid, every lie they backed. The board asked for feedback, and I sent them the truth. It was 10:47 a.m. on a Tuesday when my boss, Mark, leaned into my cubicle with that fake, "We're all a family here," smile, and said the line that flipped something in me. "He has a family, Jessica. You're single. Be a team player." That was his justification for why I was covering for Trevor, again. Trevor, who had rolled into work that morning reeking of whiskey and Red Bull. Trevor, whose family consisted of a wife I'd heard him screaming at on speakerphone, and 2 kids he bragged he barely saw. Meanwhile, I was pulling a 60-hour week to clean up his mess. I had no family, no partner, no life outside of work, as Mark liked to remind me. Apparently, that made me disposable. The worst part wasn't that Trevor got away with it. It was that Mark expected me to smile through it. "We appreciate your flexibility," he'd say, like tossing me a line of gratitude was fair payment for my sanity. That morning, I watched Trevor stumble in, hang his coat on my chair by mistake, and spend the next 4 hours doing nothing. I fielded his calls, fixed his invoices, and handled 2 of his clients. By 3 p.m., I was exhausted, but when Mark walked by, he stopped at my desk. "You seem off today," he said, lowering his voice like he was concerned. "Clients notice when your energy's low. You might want to work on your enthusiasm." Then he handed me a written warning. A warning for low enthusiasm. That was the moment I stopped being the team player. That night, I opened a blank spreadsheet and titled it Operations Log T. McCarthy. Every time Trevor left early, every time he clocked out for client meetings that were really bar tabs at O'Malley's, every time Mark approved it, I wrote it down. Screenshots, timestamps, internal emails. The kind of documentation HR loves to pretend doesn't exist until it's shoved under their nose. Over the next 3 months, I built a file so detailed it could have been a legal case. Trevor's mistakes cost clients money. His absences cost us projects. Mark's favoritism cost me sleep. And then, one random Thursday in May, a company-wide email landed in our inboxes. "To ensure workplace integrity, the board will be conducting an internal ethics review. Employees are encouraged to submit feedback anonymously." I stared at that email for a long time. My hands were shaking. Then I opened my personal account and wrote one line in the subject field. "Let me show you the truth." Attached was a 42-page PDF, time logs, emails, screenshots, client correspondence, and a summary that ended with, "This is not about one man drinking on the job. It's about leadership enabling it, punishing those who speak up, and calling it teamwork." I hit send. The next morning, Mark didn't show up. Neither did Trevor. By noon, HR had locked the conference room doors. The blinds were drawn. The office was silent. And that's when my phone buzzed with a message from a private number that made my stomach drop. It said, "You shouldn't have done that, Jess. You don't know what you've started." I started at Harrison and Cole Marketing 3 years before that message, fresh out of grad school, desperate and proud of my work ethic. The job was in Austin, Texas. I'd just broken up with my boyfriend, had no real support system, and thought that throwing myself into my career would fill the hole he left behind. For a while, it did. I was the kind of employee who volunteered for late nights, extra accounts, and weekend deadlines. I didn't complain, didn't gossip, didn't make waves. I was the reliable one. Everyone said so. Then Trevor McCarthy joined the team. He was older, mid-30s, ex-frat boy, full of charm and lazy confidence. He called everyone buddy or sweetheart, wore expensive watches, and told the same joke about how marketing's just lying but with better PowerPoints. At first, he was just annoying. Then he became a problem. He'd come in hungover, miss client calls, and pawn his work off on me. The first time he asked for help, I didn't mind. "Just this once," I said, finishing his slide deck so he could make his son's soccer game. But just once turned into every week. Soon, Mark, the branch manager, started pairing us on everything. "You two make a great team," he'd say, though everyone knew what that meant. I did the work, Trevor got the credit. I remember one Friday, Mark called me into his office. His tone was all fake sympathy. "Jess, I know it feels unfair sometimes," he said, "but Trevor's dealing with a lot." His wife's been sick, he's under pressure, he's got a family, you know. That line, he's got a family, became his go-to justification for everything. Every missed deadline, every sloppy mistake, every late arrival. Meanwhile, when I asked to leave early once to take my dog to the vet, Mark said, "I need people I can depend on, you understand." I understood, all right. I understood that at Harrison and Cole, having a family meant you were protected. Being single meant you were a workhorse. Things got worse the quarter after Trevor landed us the Ridgemont Hotel account. Well, technically I landed it, but he was the one who presented my pitch after claiming I wasn't feeling confident. He got a $2,500 bonus and a write-up in the company newsletter. I got a mug with the company logo and a thank you for your teamwork email. It was humiliating, but I still didn't fight back. I told myself to play the long game. People notice hard work eventually, right? Then came that night at the conference in Dallas. We'd been sent to represent the company. Trevor got drunk at the hotel bar, missed his keynote slot the next morning, and I had to fill in last minute. I was terrified, but I nailed it. Clients applauded. One even said, "You're the future of this firm." When we got back, Mark called me into his office again. I expected praise. Instead, he shut the door and sighed. "Jess, I know you mean well," he said, "but stepping in like that makes Trevor look bad. It's not a good look for the team." Then he smiled, like he'd just given me sage advice. That's when something started to change in me. I stopped believing in hard work gets rewarded. I started watching instead, paying attention, noticing who covered for whom, who whispered to who in the break room, who mysteriously forgot to log overtime. And one night, about a month later, I caught Trevor sneaking out the side door at 3:15 p.m., while still clocked in. He was drunk, giggling on the phone, saying, "Nah, Jess has it. She always does." I took a photo. That was the first entry in what would become the operations log. But back then, I didn't know how deep it went. I thought it was just favoritism. I had no idea about the real reason Mark protected Trevor or what the company was hiding. And the truth, when I finally uncovered it, didn't just cost them their jobs. It almost cost me mine. After I started tracking Trevor, the illusion of just a lazy coworker fell apart fast. At first, I only meant to document a few things: missed calls, unfiled reports, the way Mark always signed off on his emergency absences. But once you start looking closely, patterns start screaming at you. Within 2 weeks, my spreadsheet had over 50 entries. Trevor's average workday, barely 4 hours. His client meetings, 70% were bars, 20% were golf courses, and 10% were just flat-out lies. But the real kicker, Mark always approved his time sheets before Trevor even submitted them. That meant it wasn't just Trevor abusing the system. It was both of them. I started to see it everywhere. Trevor would saunter into Mark's office, door closed for half an hour, then come out grinning. Next thing I knew, my workload had doubled again. When I asked for help, Mark said, "Trevor's been taking on extra responsibility behind the scenes. You should show the same initiative." I almost laughed. Behind the scenes, the man could barely type an email without a typo. But fine. If they wanted me invisible, I'd use that invisibility. I started BCCing myself on everything: client complaints, invoice discrepancies, scheduling emails. I saved Slack messages, HR memos, even snippets of audio from meetings where Mark openly praised Trevor for managing projects I had literally executed. It became my side job, collecting evidence. Then came the weekend that broke me. We had a high-profile pitch for a real estate client, big money, big stakes. Trevor was supposed to handle logistics, I handled creative. 2 days before the presentation, Trevor texted me, "Got a family thing. Can you polish my slides and maybe run the rehearsal? I'll owe you." He didn't owe me anything, not in his world. Still, I did the work. Stayed up until 3 a.m., built a flawless deck and rehearsed with the team. The pitch went perfectly, but Trevor didn't even show up. No email, no message. When I got back to the office Monday, Mark called an all-hands meeting. He congratulated Trevor for leading the most successful client pitch this quarter. I remember just staring. My throat burned. Everyone clapped. No one looked at me. Afterward, I went straight to HR. Sat down with Denise, the HR director, and laid it all out. The absences, the cover-ups, the workload imbalance. She gave me the sympathetic head tilt. "We really appreciate your feedback," she said. like I was talking about printer toner, not corruption. But we can't act on hearsay. Try to work it out with your supervisor. My supervisor, Mark. The one enabling it all. That night, I started encrypting my file, password protected it, backed it up to my personal drive, because now I wasn't just frustrated, I was angry. A week later, HR called me in again, but not to thank me. They handed me a notice. Low morale, lack of collaboration, failure to embody company values. It was a warning. The second one, another step toward termination. I walked out of that room shaking. It was clear now Mark had gotten to them. But if they were going to paint me as the problem, then I was done playing defense. So I started digging deeper. I went through internal shared drives, archived emails, and financial reports that weren't exactly locked down. That's when I found it, buried in an old vendor invoice folder. A document labeled Q2 Expenses Confidential. It wasn't just routine spending. It was reimbursement claims, thousands of dollars worth for client entertainment, hospitality, and consulting bonuses. All signed by Mark, all paid to Trevor's wife's company, a company that didn't exist in any public registry. That's when it hit me. Trevor wasn't just being protected because he was lazy or charming. He was being protected because he and Mark were running something together. And if that were true, then my little spreadsheet wasn't just evidence of favoritism. It was evidence of fraud. When I realized what that file meant, I sat at my desk in total silence. The office buzzed around me, phones ringing, keyboards clacking, but I couldn't hear any of it. My whole body went cold. Trevor's wife's company. McCarthy Consulting Services. The name alone sounded fake, but what was worse was that it had been collecting consulting fees for over a year. Thousands, sometimes tens of thousands each quarter, all approved by Mark. I cross-checked the vendor ID in the accounting software with the external directory. No tax record, no business registration, just a PO box in Cedar Park. That was when I realized they weren't just bending company policy, they were embezzling money. The next morning, I came in early, like I always did. Mark was already there, sitting in his glass office with the blinds half drawn. He had a coffee mug in one hand, phone in the other, and when he saw me, he gave that practiced corporate smile that made my stomach twist. "Morning, Jess. You're early as usual," he said. I wanted to confront him right then, but I didn't. I needed proof that was bulletproof, something they couldn't spin, couldn't hide behind. So I spent the next 2 weeks quietly connecting the dots, matching payments, verifying signatures, tracking when Mark's approvals lined up with Trevor's absences. It painted a perfect picture. Mark signed the reimbursement requests, Trevor funneled company money through his wife's fake business, and both of them got paid. I thought I was being careful. I really did. But apparently someone noticed. It started with small things. My desk drawer was open one morning when I came in. My stapler moved. My USB drive slightly unplugged. Once, I caught Trevor hovering around my cubicle after hours, claiming he was looking for a file. And then, one Friday afternoon, Mark called me into his office. His tone was friendly, but his eyes weren't. "Close the door," he said. He motioned for me to sit. "I've been getting some feedback, Jess. People are concerned you're distracted, a bit paranoid even. Is there something going on?" I could feel my pulse in my throat. "No," I said, careful not to sound defensive. He smiled. "Good, because this company depends on trust. We're a team. And if anyone tries to undermine that, they won't last long here." It was a threat. He wanted me scared. But all it did was confirm that he knew something. That weekend, I backed up everything. The entire operations log, all the financial files, screenshots, emails, everything, to an encrypted drive I stored in my apartment's fireproof safe. The following Monday, Trevor didn't show up again, but his wife did. I'll never forget that moment. She walked straight into the office like she owned the place, heels clicking, hair slicked back, carrying a leather briefcase. Introduced herself to reception as a consultant for the firm. I stood there frozen. A consultant, the same fake title on all those fraudulent invoices. She even went into Mark's office and closed the door behind her. They stayed in there for almost an hour. When she came out, she looked right at me. Not just at me, through me, like she already knew I was the problem. That night, I got a text from an unknown number. "Stop digging, Jess. You don't understand what you're getting into." My hands shook so bad I dropped my phone. I knew then that they were watching me. And 2 days later, HR called me in again, this time not with a warning but a termination notice. The reason? Breach of confidentiality. When I asked for specifics, Denise, the HR director who'd brushed me off before, just said, "You accessed internal files outside your role's scope." Someone had reported me. And the name on the HR form listed the complainant as T. McCarthy. Trevor. He'd thrown me under the bus to save himself. But he made one mistake. He didn't know that I'd already copied everything. And he didn't know what I was about to do with it. Getting fired didn't feel real at first. One moment I was sitting at my desk, staring at an open spreadsheet, and the next, security was walking me to the elevator with a cardboard box full of my things. My coworkers didn't say a word. Some avoided eye contact. A few whispered, Trevor wasn't there that morning. Neither was Mark, but their shadows were. Outside, the Texas sun felt cruel, too bright, too ordinary. I sat in my car in the parking lot, gripping the steering wheel, the termination notice still warm from the printer. Breach of confidentiality. That was the official story. But the truth, I'd gotten too close. I remember laughing. It wasn't a happy sound, more like something cracking inside me. For months I'd been the team player, the good soldier. And now I was out, branded as the problem. But they underestimated me. See, the company laptop they'd wiped clean wasn't the only place the files existed. I had backups. 3, actually. One on a personal drive, one on an encrypted cloud folder, and one printed copy hidden in the bottom of an IKEA storage bin in my apartment. And after 2 days of feeling sorry for myself, I decided that if they wanted a problem, I'd become their worst one. First, I needed to understand how deep the fraud went. I started cross-referencing company press releases, public procurement data, and LinkedIn updates from our clients. A pattern emerged. Every time Trevor's wife's company received a consulting payment, a new client deal closed shortly after, often with suspiciously inflated budgets. That meant they weren't just stealing from the company, they were padding invoices to siphon extra money off client projects. That's not internal policy violation territory. That's federal wire fraud. The question was, how to expose it in a way that couldn't be traced back to me. I spent a week researching corporate whistleblower protocols. The key was timing and credibility. I needed to hit both the company's internal compliance team and an external regulator at once, with proof too detailed to Barry. Then, I remembered the upcoming internal ethics review. It was announced every spring by the corporate board. They sent out anonymous surveys, claiming they wanted transparent feedback. Normally, it was a joke. People used it to complain about vending machine prices or broken printers. But this year, I could use it for something else. If I sent my documentation through that channel, it would go directly to the board's legal team, bypassing Mark, HR, and everyone local. So I started preparing my report. I didn't write it like a rant. I wrote it like a case file. Dates, times, attachments, cross-referenced entries. I even formatted it in the company's internal reporting style so it looked official. Each section began with evidence, not opinion. Expense reimbursement $77,452, approved by M. Jensen on 3/12. Vendor. McCarthy Consulting Services unregistered entity. Associated client invoice, $84,000. Actual cost per records, $57,000. I labeled it the McCarthy file. Still, one problem haunted me. If they suspected it came from me, they'd bury it, or worse, retaliate harder. So I created a new anonymous email account, masked my IP with a VPN, and used a burner Wi-Fi connection at a coffee shop downtown. I wrote the subject line in 6 simple words. Let me show you the truth. Before sending it, I attached the file, sat there with my cursor hovering over the button, and told myself, once you do this, there's no going back. Then I hit send. The message went directly to the board's ethics inbox. After that, I didn't sleep much. Every buzz of my phone made me jump. Every unknown number felt like a threat. But 3 days later, something shifted. An email went out company-wide. Due to recent developments, the ethics review process will now include an independent financial audit. Please cooperate fully with investigators. Mark didn't come in that day. Neither did Trevor. Rumors spread fast, something about irregularities in the finance department. HR was silent. Everyone was nervous. That's when the anonymous number texted me again. You think you're safe because you're out. You're not. For a moment, I almost regretted it. But then I got another email from the board's legal department. It wasn't addressed to me directly, but the subject line was familiar. Follow up. McCarthy file submission. My hands shook as I opened it. The body was short, just one sentence. We have reviewed your materials. Please be prepared for formal testimony. That's when I realized this was bigger than I'd thought, because I hadn't just exposed Mark and Trevor. I'd exposed the entire regional division. The email from the board's legal team hit me like a punch. Formal testimony. I wasn't ready for that. I thought I could stay anonymous, drop the bomb, and walk away. But apparently, the evidence I sent was too detailed, too organized. It screamed insider knowledge. I tried to stay calm. I called the number listed in the footer of the message, expecting a receptionist or legal assistant. Instead, a man answered on the first ring. His voice was low, controlled. Miss Lewis, he said. He knew my name. This is Andrew Carter from the board's compliance office. We received your submission. I want to thank you for your courage in coming forward. That word, courage, landed heavy. I didn't feel brave. I felt exposed. He asked if I could meet him the next morning at a downtown law office off Congress Avenue. He promised confidentiality, said the company was conducting a forensic audit, and that my cooperation could accelerate corrective action. I agreed, though my gut told me something was off. The next morning, I showed up early. The office looked legitimate: glass doors, receptionist, conference rooms with the company's logo on the walls. Andrew was there, mid-40s, suit too perfect, handshake firm. He asked questions for nearly 2 hours. When I started tracking Trevor, how I got the documents, who else knew, I told him everything. I left out nothing. When we finished, he thanked me again. You did the right thing, he said. But as I left the building, I noticed something strange. The security badge he'd worn, black with gold lettering, didn't say corporate compliance. It said Executive Security Division. That division didn't exist. I'd worked there for 3 years. I would have known. Something about that didn't sit right. That night, I looked up the address of the office he'd used. The suite number didn't belong to the company. It was leased by a private investigations firm contracted by Harrison and Cole for internal loss prevention. They weren't investigating Mark and Trevor. They were investigating me. I realized I'd walked right into their hands, told them everything, handed them my timeline, my methods, even confirmed how much evidence I had. By the next morning, all my cloud backups were gone. Every link broken. My encrypted drive still worked, but my secondary copies, the ones I'd uploaded to a secure folder, had been accessed. The activity logs showed a login from an IP address registered to Harrison and Cole's IT department. They'd hacked me. That same day, a courier knocked on my apartment door with an envelope. No return address. Inside was a single piece of paper. Cease and desist immediately. Further disclosure of confidential material will result in legal action. I called the number listed for Andrew Carter. It rang twice, then disconnected. When I tried to email him again, the message bounced back. User not found. I was panicking now, realizing that the company hadn't just tried to silence me, they'd preempted me. They were creating a trail to make me look unstable, like a disgruntled ex-employee who fabricated everything. So I did the only thing left that made sense. I reached out to someone outside the system, a journalist. Her name was Megan Ruiz, an investigative reporter for the Austin Chronicle. I'd read one of her exposés on corporate kickbacks a year before. I sent her a single-line email with no attachments. You want a story about embezzlement and cover-ups? Call me. JL, she called within an hour. I met her that night in a diner off Burnett Road, sitting in a corner booth with my encrypted drive in my bag. I told her everything: Mark, Trevor, the fake consulting company, the payments, the intimidation, the fake compliance officer. She listened, silent, her pen scratching the page. When I handed her the drive, she slid it into her bag and said quietly, "If what's on here is real, this company's about to explode." And she was right. 3 weeks later, the Chronicle ran a headline that made my heart stop. Exclusive: Whistleblower exposes embezzlement and retaliation inside Harrison and Cole. But here's where the real twist hit me, one even Megan hadn't seen coming. Because when the article went live, the story didn't name Mark Jensen or Trevor McCarthy. It named me. The company had leaked internal documents, edited ones, that painted me as the embezzler. They claimed I'd fabricated fake invoices under Trevor's wife's business name to frame my coworkers out of revenge for termination. They turned the whole story around. And within 24 hours, my phone was flooded with messages, reporters camped outside my apartment, and my professional reputation, everything I'd worked for, was gone. I thought I'd burn them down, but they'd set me up first. The day the article dropped, my name was everywhere. Disgruntled employee fabricates fraud claims, marketing analyst behind fake invoices, former worker under investigation. Every outlet that picked it up used the company's phrasing word for word, like they'd all been handed the same press release. And they had. Harrison and Cole's PR machine worked fast. The narrative was simple. I was bitter, unstable, and had unlawfully accessed internal systems to create false documents. It was too clean, too polished. Someone had planned this long before the Chronicle article ever ran. At first, I thought it was just corporate damage control, a smear campaign. But then Megan, the reporter, called me 3 days later, her voice low and shaky. "Jess, I've been digging deeper," she said. "You were right about the money, but there's something else, something worse." I met her that night in the same diner, same booth. She slid a folder across the table. Inside were bank records, not mine, not Trevor's. Mark's. He had multiple accounts under different names, all connected to a holding company in Delaware. And those accounts had received steady monthly transfers, not just from Harrison and Cole's accounts, but from a client. A client I recognized immediately. The Ridgemont Hotel. The same project I had led. The one Trevor took credit for. Megan looked me dead in the eye. "Mark's been funneling kickbacks through client accounts for years," she said. "Trevor was just his cover. The fake consulting company was a middleman shell to wash the money clean, and when you started sniffing around, they needed a scapegoat." I felt my stomach drop. "So they set me up," she nodded. "They didn't just set you up, they used you. You were the perfect Mark. Young, ambitious, single, no family, no real leverage. They made sure every traceable digital footprint pointed to you. You logging into finance systems. They counted on that, the files you accessed. They wanted you to find them. It gave them proof that you'd been snooping illegally." It made sense in the most horrifying way. Every warning, every concern Mark raised about my behavior, every time HR brushed me off, they weren't ignoring me. They were building a record against me. Megan flipped another page in the folder. It was an internal memo from the company's executive board, dated a week before I was fired. "Ray, employee Jessica Lewis, risk containment plan." They had a containment plan. I wasn't paranoid, they were documenting how to neutralize me before I could go public. The fake compliance interview, the wiped drives, the cease and desist, it was all part of that strategy. "Why?" I asked. "Why go this far? Why not just fire me quietly?" Megan hesitated. "Because if you'd been fired quietly, you could still talk. They needed to destroy your credibility first. They wanted to make sure no one believed you, even if you had proof." Then she slid one last page across the table. It was a copy of a wire transfer, $45,000, from Ridgemont Hotel's development fund to McCarthy Consulting Services. Signed and approved by Mark Jensen. The date on it? 2 weeks after I'd been terminated. Meaning the fraud hadn't just continued, it had expanded. And that's when Megan told me the part that truly chilled me. She'd interviewed a former accountant from another branch. The woman had quit years ago under stress-related reasons. But off-record, she confessed that she'd once tried to report a suspicious payment structure tied to Mark. A month later, she'd been audited by the IRS, anonymous tip. Her reputation ruined. She moved states, changed her name, never worked in finance again. Mark had done this before. I wasn't the first. And Trevor, he wasn't just Mark's partner in fraud, he was his shield. A patsy to draw attention away from the real operation, someone dumb enough to enjoy the perks without understanding the system he was part of. But there was one thing neither of them accounted for. When they wiped my cloud backups, they missed something. A single auto-synced folder on my old phone, one that still contained timestamps, screenshots, and PDFs I'd exported months earlier. Megan's eyes widened when I told her. "You still have the originals?" I nodded. "All of it with metadata." That's when she smiled, not cruelly, but with that kind of fire that only burns in people who want justice more than safety. "This isn't over," she said. They framed the wrong woman. For the first time in months, I believed her. Because I finally understood something terrifying and liberating all at once. They hadn't destroyed me to hide the truth. They destroyed me because I was the truth. And I was about to make them regret ever thinking I'd stay quiet. Once I realized what they'd done, how they'd set me up, erased my evidence, turned my name into a warning for anyone else who might talk, I stopped thinking like a victim. I started thinking like them. Megan and I spent 2 straight nights rebuilding the case. We went through every scrap of data from that old phone backup, screenshots, timestamps, file names, and embedded metadata that proved the files existed months before the company claimed I fabricated them. Every document bore internal system signatures, identifiers that could only come from authorized access. That meant I couldn't have faked anything. Only Mark and Trevor had that clearance. We made 2 folders. One labeled fraud, one labeled retaliation. The first had the financial evidence. The second had everything about their cover-up, fake memos, HR reports, even the cease and desist letter they'd sent through a shell law firm that didn't exist in the state registry. Then Megan reached out to someone she trusted, a contact at the Texas Attorney General's office, a financial crimes investigator named Paul Serrano. He'd worked on corporate embezzlement cases before, including one that took down a regional bank. She didn't give him my name at first. Just said she had a whistleblower source with documentation that could connect Harrison and Cole to interstate wire fraud. Paul agreed to meet us privately. We met in the back room of a coffee shop off South Lamar, early in the morning before it opened. I slid the flash drive across the table, half expecting him to laugh or shrug it off. He didn't. He spent 20 minutes scrolling, then looked up with an expression that made the whole thing feel real for the first time. "This isn't small," he said. "This is organized. You're talking about falsified consulting fees, shell companies, tax evasion, and retaliation against a protected witness. This is federal." He asked if I was willing to sign an affidavit. I hesitated for a long moment, then nodded. "Let's do it." For the next month I stayed quiet. No social media, no calls from old coworkers, just silence. Meanwhile, the investigation moved in the background. Paul said nothing except that things were developing. Then, one morning in August, I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing nonstop. I thought it was spam, until I saw the headline notification from Reuters. FBI raids Harrison and Cole offices amid embezzlement probe. I opened the article and read it over and over. Agents had seized financial records, company laptops, and communications servers. 2 executives were detained for questioning. One of them was Mark Jensen. The other was Trevor McCarthy. Trevor's wife's consulting company was now confirmed as a shell used to launder over $600,000 in diverted client funds. And according to the official report, the money trail went higher than anyone thought, right up to regional leadership. By the afternoon, my phone was blowing up again, this time from reporters asking for comment. I didn't answer. The company tried to reach out through their lawyers, offering a settlement and confidentiality agreement. I turned it down. Then the Attorney General's office filed formal charges. HR Director Denise resigned. Mark was indicted. Trevor took a plea deal. The board issued a public apology, thin, careful, and insincere, but it didn't matter. I got my reputation back, not my old job, not my old peace of mind, but something better. When the investigation wrapped up months later, Paul called me personally. "You know," he said, "if you ever want to consult on compliance ethics, we could use someone who actually knows what integrity looks like." I didn't say yes right away. I just thanked him and hung up. That night, I sat in my apartment, the same one where I'd once cried over a cardboard box of desk junk, and opened a new document. At the top, I typed 6 words. "Let me show you the truth." Not as a warning this time, as a reminder, because the truth doesn't destroy you. It exposes who's already rotten. And when people like Mark and Trevor forget that, there's always someone like me, quiet, underestimated, patient, ready to keep receipts. They called me a liability. Turns out I was the audit.